Climate extremes have become severely commonplace, but one particular term that has become even more plentiful in journalistic parlance, especially these days, is flood. In one of my previous lectures, I had talked about in depth about the drainage woes that is causing the sudden outbursts of floods in urban cities such as Delhi. Then I thought to myself, why not go beyond the national borders and study about the various topographical and climatic factors which are behind these hydrometeorological hazards besides the anthropogenic influences. Don't worry, at the end, I'll also grapple with our Millennium City. So stay tuned. This is going to be a very interesting session. So, first of all, we all know there's the map of USA. So, in USA, over the past few weeks, especially in July, in the initial 2 weeks of July, some cities, some states were drastically adversely affected by floods. So, some of these states we are going to discuss. One is Texas, one is New Mexico, one is New York. This is also part of New York, and one is Illinois, particularly its metropolitan hub, Chicago, on the banks of Lake Michigan. So we know that the temperatures are rising. One common fact that you might have come across in the news every now and again is that for every 1 degree Celsius rise in temperature, the moisture holding capacity of the atmosphere or air increases by 7%. So more moisture, the atmosphere will hold more moisture. So that means when it will rain, it will pour. If a thunderstorm is occurring, if rainfall is occurring at a particular place, then the clouds will shed, the atmosphere will shed immense amount of this high amount of moisture at one particular place. So this is one of the factors. Then what is happening is these summer months we know, like we have from June to September in India, the monsoon. Then here also, the summer months, there is extreme aridity, there is extreme convection in some places. Due to the extreme temperatures, the storm triggering effects, or the winds that carry the winds forward, they are not as strong. So some of the storms which are common in these areas, the tropical storms, which are sometimes known as cyclones when the speed increases in the Indian Ocean, here in the Atlantic Ocean, they are known as the hurricanes. So some of the decaying storms in this area recently were Storm Barry and Storm Chantal. So these decaying storms. So I'm talking one factor, I've talked about the moisture. Another factor is the intense convection due to high temperatures. Then the decaying storms, which are there, Barry. So, due to the weakening of the storm currents, these storms have lingered or they have accumulated in one particular place and they have shed their moisture. So, this is again. So, these are the common trends. Now, if we look at the specific regional factors, we first consider the Texas map because here it was much covered in news. A lot of lives were lost, a lot of places were destroyed. But apart from this, we know this is the here we have the Gulf of Mexico. So, this Gulf of Mexico is a body of water which is warm and consists of moist air above it. And this moist air is driven towards the coastal regions such as Texas, and when these winds shed their moisture, so a lot of rainfall takes place. Now, if we consider the topographical factors along with the storms such as Barry and the high temperatures, this is very interesting to note. Here you can see the difference. This is a relief map or a topographical map of Texas. So here, this is known as the Balcones Escarpment. So balconies escarpment is basically a long cliff or a steep slope that is produced as a result of the upliftment of one part of the surface as compared to the other. So for example, if we have a surface, level surface like this, but due to certain activities such as the activation of faults or erosion, this structure gets on a different level. So what will happen? This part will be appraised as compared to this level, and as a result, it will be known as a scarp or an escarpment. Now it is a very steep escarpment. This is on the edge of this is the Edwards Plateau. What happens is the warm, moist air from the Gulf of Mexico. It is already very moist. It is carrying a lot of moisture, and it also contains the remnants of tropical decaying storms such as Barry. And this, after encountering the escarpment, it is forced to rise. And what happens when water vapor, air containing water vapor, will rise? It will condense, form clouds, and under the influence of gravity, it will shed its moisture in the form of rainfall. Okay, now that is not all. Because of this slope, the water will then start flowing downwards. Then there are some important rivers in this region. So this is the Guadalupe River. Okay, it's a major river of in Texas. This Guadalupe is not supposed to be confused with Guadeloupe. This is an over Guadeloupe, which this is an overseas territory of France in the Caribbean Sea, whereas this is a river in Texas. This another important river is Colorado. Again, Colorado River is not to be confused with the Colorado River, which makes the Grand Canyon in the state of Utah. Okay, then some important places here. We have here the capital of, we have here San Antonio. We have here the capital of Texas, Austin. Okay, here we have Houston. Houston, we have a problem, famous for the Johnson Space Center. Here in the arid region, we have El Paso. You might have come across this. Okay, so these and the places which were drastically affected in this, here we have the Care County is the place, and another place which was affected was the Mystic Camp. Okay, these two places were affected. Now these are relatively narrow streams. About 10 to 12 inches of rainfall took place in a short span of 12 hours. Now here it is pertinent to discuss what exactly is meant by a flash flood. Okay, these terms are important when we study geography. So first of all, if we recollect what is a flood. So flood is basically a state of high water level. We'll just discuss just the keywords and you will be able to understand. In a river channel or along a coast which inundates, or floods, submerges the low-lying areas, and that area which is normally not submerged. Okay, so this makes the definition. Now, particularly in this era, in this age of climate extremes, climate change, we are talking of a particular phenomena known as urban flood. So we combine flood, definition remains same. When we talk about urban, what is an urban area? It is a built up environment, high population density, characterized by manufacturing or service sector. So, urban flood refers to flood that is occurring in a built up environment, normally with a high population density. So, that is urban flood. Then, if we remove urban, if we say Flash, you can relate with the DC Comics character, the fastest man alive, that is Flash. So, sudden advent or pouring or increase in volume of water in a very short period of time around the normal criteria is 6 hours. Okay, so that is known as flash floods. Now flash floods normally we have experienced in hilly areas like Chamoli, Mandi, Dharamshala, okay, Uttarkashi, Kedarnath. So those, the reasons can be cloudburst, excess rainfall, GLOF, glacial lake outburst flood, even landslides, because they will occupy or displace the water, the materials, the gravel, sand, boulders, they will displace the water. So these are the reasons. Okay, now coming back to this. So similarly, when 12 inches, 10 to 12 inches of rainfall took place in Texas, these areas, these Guadalupe, Colorado rivers, these streams and channels could not contain that water or channel that water, and these banks were breached, and hence the surrounding areas were affected, and it turned into a disaster. Flood is a hazard. This is also interesting concept. Hazard becomes a disaster when there is a loss of livelihood, property, biodiversity. So when people died, when property loss took place, flood became a disaster. One more information, often you might come across this also, hill country. In the heading I had used the term intentionally, flood country. So actually this edge on which this Care County, these areas, Mystic Camp, where the affected areas, adversely affected areas were located, this edge of the Edwards Plateau is known as hill country. Okay, just for information. Fine. So these were the major factors. So Texas is now cleared. Let us move to New Mexico. Now, apart from these normal factors, what here New Mexico, what different factor was responsible for the adverse effect of floods was that there is a place here known as Ruidoso. So here this place, this region is affected by wildfires. So already the vegetation is very sparse. Okay, the soil is very loose. So what will happen? The soil is very loose. There is hardly any vegetation. So as soon as rainfall, as soon as even 1 to 2 inches of rainfall takes place, it will just run off on the soil. So this is also known as surface runoff. So this was one of the prime reason, apart from the natural factors such as high convection, high moisture, these storms. Then we come to here another place, this North Carolina. So North Carolina, one of the major factors besides this moisture was the tropical storm, remnants of tropical storm, or we can also call a minute form of miniature form of hurricane Chantal. Now again, important aspect of geography, if you remember, there is in geography we have studied that there is a mountain range here extending in this direction, Appalachian. So what happened was the rainfall, it took place on this side, on this slope of the Appalachian Mountains. This is the Piedmont Plateau. Piedmont Plateau is basically a plateau tableland which is situated at the foot of the mountains, and here we have the plains. So the water, there is a very loose layer of soil, topsoil, and with very a few amount or few inches of rainfall, this soil was carried away in surface runoff, and similar to what happened in Texas, here also it was affected by floods. Now, this Illinois, Chicago is a important city, New York City in the state of New York. These two cities, common factor apart from these factors are the concretization, or concretization or the urbanization. Obviously, if if soil has the capacity of water, it allows water to percolate down and collect as aquifer or groundwater. If you place if you place concrete over it, concrete hard steel over it, so it will not allow the surface runoff, the water which is falling in the form of rainfall to percolate. So it will flow, the surface runoff, it will overwhelm the drainage capacity or the sewerage system of these cities, these regions, and thus again cause floods. This is one of the main reasons, one of the common reasons which these cities are sharing with the flooding in cities like Bengaluru, Gurgaon, Hyderabad, Pune, even Delhi. Okay. So these case studies are interesting. That is why, again, this I'll not discuss in detail because this is supposed to be a general, not just for competitive examination. Just I am repeating for the sake of interest. This deals with the jet streams. So jet streams are nothing but narrow meandering bands of swift flowing winds which flow in the upper troposphere. So they flow from west to east. This is an example of a polar jet stream in the mid latitudes. So sometimes what happens is when they meander, they form the aspects such as this is a trough and this is a ridge. So a ridge is normally accompanied by a high pressure, whereas a trough is accompanied by low pressure. Low pressure refers to, it denotes instability. Convective currents will take place, air will rise, so it will further emphasize the impact of the high moisture content, the storms, and further enforce the amount of rainfall or precipitation that is taking place. So that's an additional concept. Okay. Now, in the initial part, you might have noticed this picture. You might have recognized Mr. Trump, Mr. Donald Trump, already is obsessed with tariffs, but we're not going to go. So there is this National Weather Service in the United States, which is a branch of NOAA, National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, which is responsible for collecting and disseminating data about atmosphere, about hydrosphere, and studying the various aspects. And National Weather Service in particular is responsible for disseminating warnings to the people in case of disasters. Like we have the Disaster Management Authority in India. So National Weather Service, now it is alleged that when these Texas floods took place, the rainfall will took place due to the recent cuts in the jobs. Around since May 15, around 15% of the personnel in NWS have either uh, ex- uh, resorted to buyouts or they have voluntarily retired. Then they have been laid off, and further 25% of the $6 billion budget for National Weather Services has been cut. So it is being alleged. People have been saying that the amber style alerts, which were to be issued, they were not issued at time. That is why it augmented or drastically increased the losses in livelihood and property. Then, moreover, the one another reason is that the alerts, whatever alerts were issued, they were issued during the night time when people were fast asleep. So, obviously, they were not aware of them. But generally, it has also been countered by some officials that that is not the case. Even some more officials were at task. But the larger picture is what the professionals are saying, what the experts are saying with this cut in the budget and all, the the measures of monitoring the atmosphere and weather in particular, like balloons, and the infrastructure and the staff required to coordinate the emergency warning efforts, that is going to suffer. So this is just a brief concept. Now we come to our millennium city, or rather I call it the delirium city. because we have witnessed that Gurgaon often goes underwater, and this is not the first time this has happened. So some of the factors. Now this, I was talking initial part of the lecture, I had talked about Delhi. So in one of my previous lectures, you can visit it, I had discussed in detail how the haphazard urbanization and lack of consideration of topography while building infrastructure has been one of the major causes responsible for flooding. And unfortunate incident in 2024 took place when students, UPSC students in Rajendra Nagar lost their lives. So here in the brown, you can see prominently, just I'll repeat in brief, these are the Aravali range, the ridge area, the residual mountains. So some uplifted region, like for example, what during the Mughals or what the British did, like this Tughlakabad, like this areas, Mehrauli. So these forts, they were built on the higher structure so as to prevent them from floods. Moreover, during the British time, during the earlier medieval times, there were a lot of channels and canals to divert or channel the water away from a particular place. Obviously, a simple concept is that if rain is falling over an area, and there are multiple channels, multiple drains, they are not clogged, they are cleaned regularly, and they can divert the flow. So obviously the chance for a flood, hazard like flood, turn into a disaster is pretty less. But now what is happening is we have concretized, we have put buildings here, encroachment of channels, encroachment of wetlands, the drains are polluted, garbage waste. So where will the water flow? That is going to get accumulated in a particular place. It is going to flood or go over the roads, over the populated areas, or over the inhabited areas. So this is one of the reasons. Now in particular, if we study Gurgaon, first of all, I just want to give you an idea of the Aravali range, just for interest purposes. Okay, so this is, we know, Haryana, this is Rajasthan, this is MP, this is UP, and this is then Gujarat. Okay, so the Aravali range, they spread all the way Gujarat, and then they move from here, and here we have Delhi. Okay, and here on the southwest side of Delhi we have Gurgaon. So my point is that Gurgaon is surrounded on three sides by the Aravali Hills. Here you can see the remnant of Aravali Hills, and the topography has not been taken into consideration. Here, this region, Gurgaon, is developed, the infrastructure is developed such that it is at a lower level. So, whatever precipitation is taking place, it will obviously, because of potential energy, it will go and settle in the lower areas. Okay, let's first study this diagram. Here, I need to rotate this a bit to show, because this is the north side. So that is why I have to rotate this. Okay. So this is the Aravali Hills as I've drawn in the previous page, coming from the south, southwest. Now look at this, some of the important places. This is, this is not NH8, this is now NH48 according to the new naming. So this is NH48 coming all the way from Delhi and going into Gurgaon and further. So some important places you might recognize, Ifko Chowk. Then there is this Gwal Pahadi area, and this is Kherki Majra. So this is a cross-sectional area which this has been represented like this. So you can see that this area is 290-meter above sea level, and this is around 200-meter above sea level. There is a difference of 90-meter. To put it into perspective, it is equivalent to a multi-story building. So obviously, the water, whatever water precipitation is occurring here, it is going to flow in this direction. Then there are some drains, Badshahpur drain, and further it merges with the Najafgarh drains. Drains are there, but there are too few, and that too clogged or encroached. Now I'll give you a brief feedback. Now in the 1920s, there were more than 60 canals in this region which used to carry or transport the excess water from precipitation away so that there is no waterlogging taking place. Then in 1970s, after the coming of the HUDA, formation of HUDA, the Haryana Urban Development Authority, and then consequently the arrival of major real estate players like Delhi Land and Finance, DLF, they started procuring properties from around more than 52 villages. So here in Gurgaon, we had various mustard fields, we had villages. So now, after that, what happened was haphazard construction started taking place. So some features, some important reasons. So this term you might have come across, this plug and play mode of urbanization. Just build a house there, build a society there. And some societies, I was seeing this in a news report, that some societies, some houses don't even have an approach road. They don't even have a road to take them away. There's no road joining there. So there's no consideration, no consideration to the drainage systems. And earlier in 1920s, I had given you the figure of the 60 canals. Now there are just 2 to 4 canals to divert water away. And that too, they are going into the clogged drains, the old master plans made drains, clogged drains, then the pavement encroachment, the concretization. So obviously, some of the factors which we discussed while discussing the floods in Texas, they are common. Okay. So this earlier there was an east-west axis during the time of British, which used to carry the water, spread, divert the water in different directions. But now what is happening is they have developed drains right along the roads, golf course roads, and built a road along it. So as to without now gradient we have already discussed. So, and along the roads means the drain is also running across this road. So when this drainage capacity will be overwhelmed by the high precipitation, the flash floods. So this will flood and this will accumulate here. Okay, so this is one of the reasons why all of this hazards are turning into disasters. Now, at the end, just few of the measures, few of the novel measures I had discussed while discussing the Delhi floods, what we can do to avoid such a situation or augment, mitigate or adapt to these floods, because climate change, now we have to face it as a reality. So these are also very interesting concepts which can mitigate or help us adapt to the calamity or catastrophe of floods. These are known as bioswales. Okay, so you can see from the picture in foreign countries what happens is this is basically a vegetated area, a broad, shallow, vegetated area. So these slope, what it does is whenever water precipitation will take place, so this slope will guide it towards these vegetated areas, and obviously vegetated means roots. The soil is relatively well developed. It will allow its gradual filtration as well as percolation and prevent the water from spreading out on the roads. So this is a novel concept. Then this is an example of the French drain. It has nothing to do with the country of France. Actually, this French drain was developed or conceptualized by a person known as Henry French. So it consists of gravel and underlying perforated pipes. Another novel measures which allows the water to be diverted to further canals. Okay, and one major which can be immediately applied in places like Gurgaon is the green spaces development or revitalization or rejuvenation of green spaces in order to not only prevent floods but also replenish the groundwater or aquifers. Okay, the concept is same. So this is an example how, so French drain, this is the soil, this is the excavation, then this is gravel and perforated drain tile. So this is an interesting concept. So this is all we had to discuss for today. There are plenty more concepts, but we'll discuss as time goes on. So till we meet again next time, Jai Hind.